Hey guys, today I'm adding on to this dream world that I've been creating, if you haven't seen that in my past few videos, and I'm going to add on to this building that was kind of filled with sand. I'm actually going to use that other one in the background of this to just extend the set and make it look more full and more real. And I'm also going to be using some brand new to me filmmaking techniques and equipment to get some shots that I've not been able to achieve before. I originally posted a video that reviewed the Axibo motion control system, and I am going to be using that and a new feature set of that integrates into Dragonframe software. Dragonframe will allow me to shoot basically a stop motion sequence and control other motors, not just the camera motion control, to animate some lights and things in the scene. So I think it's going to be really exciting. So first here I got started with my basic liquid latex technique of just painting over liquid latex and getting that paint to peel off. Gets a really good, quick, abandoned look to the walls of a building. And this room is going to be pretty simple. To be honest, I'm going to make an interesting shape with it, and then I'm going to fill it with sand again with some interesting kind of dune-looking things, and then everything else is going to be basically done with lighting and filmmaking techniques to make this thing really look interesting. The best part about Dragonframe and some of the techniques I'm going to show is it actually allows you to do things on more of a budget than you would think. Obviously, the Axibo motion control system is not cheap, but if you weren't using that and you're just using Dragonframe, you can actually DIY your own little motors to control lights, animate parts of your miniature, or even build your own motion control for your camera to do your basic moves. Dragonframe allows you to just wire up a bunch of different cheap motors to an Arduino that interfaces with the Dragonframe software, and then you can control it however you'd like. You can set as many keyframes as you want, and then do the stop motion sequence where it will basically take a photo with your camera, move everything to the next position for the next frame, and then take that next photo, and so on, until you have an entire sequence. In the end, this becomes a video file that looks like a real video, but it was shot over time, and that allows you to open the shutter of your camera much longer, and so you don't need as much light, and so you don't need the very expensive film lights that I often use. You can actually buy something really small and cheap, and then you can do really interesting, just dynamic effects in your miniatures for fairly little money. The addition of something like the Axibo motion control system brings it to the next level and allows you to control the camera in space and with focus and zoom controls and all of that perfectly with the other motors that you wire into Dragonframe, and so you can do repeated passes and get really interesting and complex results out of a simple scene. So with that said, I'm actually making an interesting ceiling to this to create a crazy looking light effect. Instead of just a solid ceiling, I'm putting tons of these little pieces of wood across to make it like these slats have just been falling off, growing apart, and there's all kinds of little gaps in between them. And when the light shines through these, it's going to be really stark and just create all of these shadow lines inside the miniature. And as the lights move, that will become a really striking visual effect. So I hope you can see that you can actually do something pretty visually striking without spending a lot of money and time. This is really pretty simple, this project, and just taking some of these ideas of wanting really motivated and interesting light in your miniature, just come up with an idea of how you're going to do that. In this case, it's the ceiling and some cheap lights. So then even with just an iPhone, you can get some really awesome photos and video of your miniatures. So here I'm gluing these pieces of foam in place that I've kind of shaped a little bit. They're just going to help build up some mounds of the sand so it's not just all flat in there, and there's some visual curvature to the sand that the light will play really well with. And then I'm just using the same sand as last time. I purchased this really fine reptile sand and spreading it all over, trying to keep it organic and natural. I think maybe in the future I will play with actually disturbing the sand in like intentional ways, but this time I'm keeping it flat. Then I started pulling out all of the parts that I needed to actually wire up the Arduino and motors. This is actually much more simple than you would think, and I would recommend it as a good DIY project for people that maybe haven't gotten too far into electronics. There's a great video by Chris, aka Biolapse, that I'll link in the description that I followed, and there's a lot of other people on the internet talking about this very similar kind of thing. The unique thing here, and Chris goes into it, is we use an Arduino and load the software for Dragonframe onto it, and then when you plug that into your computer, Dragonframe will be able to recognize and control the motors. So check out his video for the specifics, but basically you need a power supply, a stepper motor driver, and the Arduino. Because this is my first time putting this stuff together, I am wiring it in a very temporary way. Eventually I'm going to actually mount all this kind of stuff inside of a box and make it easy. And of course, on any kind of wiring projects, the inspector really wants to make sure I'm doing it correctly. Maybe gets in my way a little bit, but I always appreciate his help for sure. So for this setup, you can certainly get enough to power 2 little motors and the Arduino for under $200. I'll try to link the parts that I've used in the description. But as you can see, once you wire everything up, you just load that little program onto the Arduino and you can start controlling it in Dragonframe. So I mounted this little stick and one of these little lights to the motor so that I can test it out and see how I could animate this motor. Now let's go see what it looks like on set. So this is my basic setup. I've got the 2 motors with lights up on C-stands above the set, and I'm actually putting these 2 sets together so I can see through this one into the older one. And I've controlled everything through that Arduino and the Axibo on Dragonframe. So the idea is I'm going to program these lights to move over time, and so it'll just start casting all these moving shadows and lights across and give a really visually striking look. And because of Dragonframe and Axibo, I can control exactly how the camera moves at the same time of these. And Dragonframe allows you to do stop motion. So these are tiny little lights. You probably know that I usually use huge lights to get enough light, but with stop motion, I can make the shutter of each frame much longer, and so I can use little lights like this. This kit only costs like $100 for 3 lights and a bunch of accessories for it. So you can wire up smaller lights on motors like this easily and animate them, and then get all of the light you actually need into your camera by using Dragonframe stop motion. The other big reason that I chose these little lights is because the smaller the light, the harsher the shadows you're going to have. So I've actually struggled with my larger lights to get these hard shadow lines, and these lights were perfect for this type of effect here. So to set up Axibo and these motors in Dragonframe, I first come into Axibo, make sure that the Dragonframe function is turned on, and then in Dragonframe connections I can make sure the Arduino and the Axibo are both connected before continuing. And I've already added all of these different axes in here. So if I start adjusting the slide here, you can see that I've been able to move that into place, and then I can move this first motor with my first light into place and set a keyframe. I'm just setting up a really basic move to show you how this works on a basic level. So if I move the cursor over 5 seconds into the move, and then start playing around with the slide position and the motor position again, I can set a second keyframe, and then everything will be interpolated between those in the first 5 seconds of this move. You can set multiple keyframes, you can change the curves of the speed and softness of these moves, and if you're using only the Axibo and not these other motors, you can actually run moves in real time, which is fantastic. And you can come over to the cinematography page, change your camera settings, take a test shot, and then in animation you can have it take it frame by frame. So the integration into Dragonframe with Axibo is actually really good. There's only a couple slider systems out there that can enable the full real-time movement, and Axibo does this great. And so these pair really well, and I'm super excited to utilize this more and more as I continue with this channel. Alright guys, let me know what you thought of this new filmmaking technique and how it turned out. And drop any questions you have about any of this process in the comments. Stay tuned. I'm going to be doing a lot more interesting things with this whole setup coming very soon, and hopefully expand the dream world that we're creating here. I want to really delve into some story and some really interesting visual elements as we continue. So I'm really excited for that. And I've got everything in the description, as much as I can, of the parts and different things that I've used. I'll link everything, so check it out. See you guys next time.